The chalk dust hit the air like a cloud of accusations, white powder settling on the black rubber mats in Apex Performance Gym at exactly 6:43 on a Tuesday morning. Olivia Grant wiped her hands on her leggings, leaving streaks across the navy fabric, and glared at the man adjusting the squat rack across the training floor. He'd moved her bar without asking. Again, the third time in 2 weeks, and she'd reached her limit with people who thought superior strength meant superior rights to equipment. The barbell she'd loaded with her working weight now sat 5 feet away, re-racked at a different station, replaced by his setup with plates she couldn't identify from this distance. She didn't care that he was the new head trainer everyone whispered about in the locker rooms. She didn't care that half the morning crowd had started showing up early just to watch him demonstrate Olympic lifts, with form so clean it looked like physics made flesh. What she cared about was respect for other people's space, and he clearly didn't have it. "Excuse me," Olivia said, crossing the floor with her water bottle in hand like a tiny weapon. "That was my bar." He turned, 6 feet of lean muscle and annoyingly perfect posture, with a face that would have been handsome if it wasn't currently wearing an expression of mild confusion. "Your bar? The one with 135 on it? I thought someone left it." "Someone didn't leave it. I loaded it for my working sets. I stepped away for 90 seconds to chalk up." She pointed at the chalk bucket near the wall as if presenting evidence in court. "And now it's over there and you've got your setup where mine was." He glanced at the squat rack, then back at her, and had the audacity to look apologetic. "I didn't see a towel or anything marking it. If I'd known—" "You'd what? Asked? Checked? Maybe not assumed that because someone's not standing directly next to a bar. It's abandoned property." The words came out sharper than she'd planned, but she was tired. Tired of being overlooked, tired of having to defend her right to occupy space in a room full of people who thought they owned it by default. "I've seen you do this before. You walk in, rearrange everything to suit whatever you're training, and expect everyone to adjust around you. If you're watching this right now, hit that subscribe button because stories like this get messy before they get good, and you'll want to see how this plays out. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I'm curious who's listening to this kind of chaos unfold at their gym, their office, or maybe somewhere totally different." His jaw tightened, just slightly, enough that she caught it. "I apologize. Genuinely. I'll move my stuff back and reset your bar exactly how it was. Can you tell me the weight?" 135. "But that's not the point." "Then what is the point?" He crossed his arms, and she hated that the movement looked like patience instead of defensiveness. "Because if the point is that I made a mistake and I'm trying to fix it, we're good. If the point is something else, I'd like to know what I'm actually being accused of." Olivia opened her mouth, then closed it. She didn't have a clean answer. What was she accusing him of? Being inconsiderate? Being oblivious? Being the kind of person who moved through the world assuming everyone would accommodate him? All of those felt true, but none of them sounded rational when she tried to shape them into words that wouldn't make her look like she was overreacting. "Just pay attention next time," she said finally. "Not everyone here is invisible." "I never said you were invisible." His voice was calm, which somehow made it worse. "I made a mistake. I'm sorry. It won't happen again." She wanted to argue, wanted to push back against the reasonableness that felt like a wall she couldn't scale. But he was already walking toward the squat rack, already stripping plates off his bar with efficient movements that suggested he'd done this 1,000 times. She watched him reset her bar to exactly 135, chalk dust still floating in the air between them like tiny particles of unfinished conflict. 3 days later, the gym sent out an email. Apex Performance was hosting a charity fitness challenge in 6 weeks, a team-based competition combining strength, endurance, and skill events, with all proceeds going to a youth athletics program. Participation required teams of 2, mixed or same gender, and every member had to commit to a training protocol designed by the head coaching staff. Olivia read the email twice while sitting in her car before her Thursday morning session, her phone screen bright against the pre-dawn darkness outside. She'd been thinking about signing up for something like this, a concrete goal, a reason to push past her usual routine, a way to prove she belonged in the same training space as people who treated the gym like a second home instead of a battlefield. But the second line of the email made her stomach drop. All participants will be paired with an Apex performance trainer for the duration of the 6-week prep cycle. Pairings will be announced at Monday's kickoff meeting. She could already see it. 6 weeks of mandatory sessions with someone who'd critique her form, micromanage her programming, and treat her like a beginner who needed hand-holding through every lift. She almost deleted the email, almost convinced herself she didn't need external validation or structured goals. Then she remembered the feeling of standing in the middle of the gym, arguing over a barbell, and realized she was letting one bad interaction dictate her choices. That felt worse than the risk of an annoying trainer. She signed up before she could talk herself out of it. Monday's kickoff meeting happened in the gym's upstairs conference room, a space normally used for nutrition seminars and personal training consultations. 23 people showed up, a mix of regulars Olivia recognized and newcomers who looked nervous and excited in equal measure. The head coach, a woman named Janet with silver hair and the grip strength of a vice, stood at the front and explained the rules. 3 events: a strength medley, a conditioning gauntlet, and a skill challenge that would test coordination and teamwork under fatigue. Teams would train twice a week with their assigned coach, plus individual sessions on their own time, and every workout would be logged and reviewed. Pairings are based on availability, training background, and goals, Janet said, pulling up a projected list on the wall. We tried to match people who'd push each other in productive ways. If you have concerns, talk to me privately after the meeting. Olivia scanned the list. Her name appeared halfway down, and next to it, in neat digital print, Trainer Jordan Cross. She didn't recognize the name. That felt like a good sign. Maybe she'd get someone new, someone without preconceptions, someone who'd treat her like an athlete instead of a problem to be managed. She pulled out her phone and opened the gym's staff page, scrolling until she found the bio. Jordan Cross, head strength coach, certified in Olympic lifting, powerlifting, and sports performance. The photo loaded slowly, pixel by pixel, and when it finally resolved, Olivia felt her stomach twist. It was him, the guy from the squat rack, the one who'd moved her bar and then apologized with maddening reasonableness while she'd stood there feeling like an angry cliché. She looked up. He was standing near the back of the room, talking to another trainer, and as if he felt her gaze, he glanced over. Their eyes met. He gave a small nod, not quite a smile, just acknowledgement. She looked away first. After the meeting, she cornered Janet near the door. I need to request a different trainer. Janet raised an eyebrow. Any particular reason? Personality conflict. It sounded petty even as she said it, but it was the truth. We've had interactions. I don't think we'd work well together. Interactions meaning what? He was inappropriate, unprofessional. No, nothing like that, just, we don't click. Janet crossed her arms, her expression shifting from curious to firm. Olivia, I've been coaching for 22 years. I've seen every kind of personality clash you can imagine. Most of them are fixable with clear communication and mutual respect. Jordan's one of the best coaches I've ever worked with. He's patient, he's precise, and he doesn't let ego get in the way of results. If you've had a rough start, this is your chance to reset. 6 weeks of professional training relationship. You might surprise yourself. And if I don't want to be surprised, then you're welcome to withdraw from the challenge. Janet's tone wasn't unkind, just matter of fact. But we're not shuffling pairings because of a hunch. If there's a real issue, document it. Bring it to me and we'll address it. Otherwise, give it a shot. First session's Wednesday at 7 a.m. Olivia left the gym feeling like she'd been backed into a corner she'd built herself. She could quit. Walk away, keep training on her own, avoid the whole situation. But that felt like letting the squat rack incident define her more than it already had. She'd signed up because she wanted to prove something, and quitting before the first session would prove the opposite. Wednesday morning arrived with the kind of humidity that made the air feel thick before the sun even cleared the horizon. Olivia showed up 10 minutes early, partly out of habit and partly because she wanted to control the start of this interaction. Jordan was already there, setting up cones and kettlebells in the turf area, moving with the kind of efficiency that came from muscle memory rather than thought. He looked up when she approached, and his expression was carefully neutral. "Morning," he said. Ready to get started? Sure. She dropped her gym bag near the wall and started her warm-up routine without waiting for instruction. If he wanted to establish dominance through programming, she'd establish her autonomy through preparation. He didn't interrupt, just let her finish her mobility sequence, then walked over with a clipboard and a pen that looked like it had survived several years of heavy use. Okay. Before we dive into training, I want to set some ground rules. This is a 6-week professional relationship with a specific goal. I'm here to coach you through a challenging program, not to be your friend or your adversary. If something I say or do doesn't work for you, tell me immediately. If you need modifications, speak up. If you think I'm wrong about something, we'll discuss it. But once we're in a session, I'm the coach and you're the athlete, and that structure matters for safety and progress. Does that work for you? It was a script. She could tell by the way he delivered it. Smooth and practiced, like he'd given this speech a dozen times to a dozen different people. But it was also reasonable, which made it hard to argue with. Fine, she said, as long as the structure goes both ways. You respect my boundaries, I'll respect your coaching. Deal. He clicked the pen. Now, tell me about your training background. What do you lift? What's your conditioning baseline? Any injuries or limitations I should know about? She ran through the details. 4 years of consistent training, self-taught through online programs and trial and error. Squat max around 200, deadlift 220, bench 115. Conditioning decent but not exceptional. No major injuries, just the usual aches from pushing too hard without enough recovery. He took notes, asked clarifying questions that were specific enough to prove he was actually listening, and didn't once interrupt or correct her self-assessment. When she finished, he nodded. Good, that gives me a baseline. Here's the plan for today. We're testing your strength endurance and your ability to maintain form under fatigue. 5 rounds, 10 goblet squats, 10 kettlebell swings, 10 push-ups, 2-minute rest between rounds. I'll be watching your movement quality, not your speed. If your form breaks down, I'll call it, and we'll adjust the load or volume. Questions? That's it. No lecture about technique first? No demonstration? Do you need one? She hesitated. No. Then let's see what you've got. Grab the 24-kilo kettlebell and start when you're ready. The first 2 rounds felt manageable. The weight was challenging, but not crushing, and she focused on keeping her core tight, her spine neutral, her breathing controlled. Jordan stood a few feet away, silent, watching with the kind of attention that felt clinical rather than judgmental. By the 3rd round, her shoulders were burning, her quads were screaming, and the rest periods felt like they lasted 10 seconds instead of 2 minutes. Your knees are caving in on the squats, Jordan said during the 4th rest interval. Drive them out. Think about screwing your feet into the ground. She nodded, too breathless to argue, and forced the correction into the next set. It helped. The movement felt stabler, less like she was fighting the weight and more like she was controlling it. By the final round, she was moving on pure stubbornness, but she finished all 10 reps of each exercise without letting her form collapse into something dangerous. When the last push-up was done, she stayed on the ground for a moment, forehead pressed against the turf, chest heaving. Jordan crouched next to her, not too close, just near enough that she could hear him without him having to raise his voice. Good work. You pushed through fatigue without compromising safety. That's the foundation we're building on. She lifted her head. I thought you'd critique more. Why? You moved well. When you didn't, I told you. What else do you want? I don't know. She sat up, wiping sweat from her face with the hem of her shirt. I guess I expected, I don't know. More correction, more micromanagement. That's not coaching, that's controlling. He stood and offered her a hand. She looked at it for a second, then took it, letting him pull her to her feet. His grip was strong but not showy, just functional. Coaching is helping you find the best version of your movement. Control is imposing my preferences on your body. Big difference. The comment sat in her chest like something she didn't know what to do with. She'd come into this session ready to defend herself against criticism that never came, and now she felt off balance in a different way, like she'd prepared for a fight and walked into a conversation instead. Over the next 2 weeks, the sessions followed a similar pattern. Jordan programmed workouts that were challenging but not impossible, watched her move with quiet focus, and offered corrections that were specific and actionable. He didn't waste time on small talk, didn't ask about her personal life, didn't try to be anything other than exactly what he'd promised, a coach with a clear goal. Olivia found herself looking forward to the sessions in a way she hadn't anticipated, not because they were easy, but because they were consistent. She knew what to expect. She knew the rules, and slowly, grudgingly, she started to trust that he wasn't going to pull the rug out from under her with sudden judgment or arbitrary changes. But outside the training sessions, the gym still felt like contested territory. She'd see him working with other clients, demonstrating lifts with perfect form, offering the same calm corrections he gave her, and every time she'd feel a spike of something she couldn't name. Not jealousy, not quite. More like irritation that he seemed to navigate the space so easily, while she still felt like she had to fight for every inch of respect. The shift happened on a Saturday morning, 3 weeks into the prep cycle. Olivia arrived early for an open gym session, planning to work on her deadlifts before the crowd showed up. The gym was nearly empty, just a handful of early risers scattered across the floor. She set up at her usual platform, loaded the bar to 180 for her warm-up sets, and started her first pull. The weight moved smoothly, her back tight, her hips driving through at the right moment. She reset, added more plates, and pulled 205. Still good. She was chasing 225 today, a new personal record, and the adrenaline was already building in her chest like a drumbeat. She was halfway through loading the bar when she heard the crash. Sharp, metallic, followed by a shout that cut through the gym's ambient noise like a knife. She turned. Across the room, near the cable machines, a guy she didn't recognize was on the ground, his face pale, his left hand clutching his right forearm. A 45-pound plate lay next to him, still rocking slightly on its edge. Blood was starting to seep through his fingers. Jordan was there in seconds, moving faster than Olivia had ever seen him move. He knelt next to the guy, his voice low and controlled, assessing the injury with the kind of calm that only came from training or experience, or both. Someone yelled for the first aid kit. Someone else pulled out a phone to call 911. Olivia stood frozen at her platform, her hands still on the barbell, watching the scene unfold like a movie she wasn't part of. Then Jordan looked up, scanned the gym, and his eyes landed on her. "Olivia, need your help." She crossed the floor before she'd consciously decided to move. Up close, the injury looked worse, a deep gash across the guy's forearm, probably from the plate's edge catching him wrong when he'd tried to load a machine. Not life-threatening, but definitely hospital-worthy. Jordan had already pulled a clean towel from someone's bag and was applying pressure, his hands steady. "I need you to keep pressure on this while I get the first aid kit. Can you do that?" She nodded, dropped to her knees, and took over the towel. The guy was breathing fast, his eyes wide with shock, and she recognized the look. She'd seen it on her brother's face years ago when he'd fallen off his bike and split his chin open. Fear mixed with pain, mixed with disbelief that bodies could break so easily. "You're okay," she said, keeping her voice even. "It looks bad, but it's not as bad as it feels. Pressure stops the bleeding. Ambulance is on the way. Just breathe." He nodded, swallowing hard, and she kept talking, filling the space with calm words while Jordan returned with gauze and medical tape. They worked together without needing to coordinate, her holding pressure while he wrapped the wound properly, his movements precise and efficient. By the time the paramedics arrived 8 minutes later, the bleeding had slowed, and the guy's color was starting to return. After the ambulance left, Olivia washed her hands in the gym bathroom, scrubbing away the blood that had seeped through the towel onto her fingers. When she came back out, Jordan was sitting on a bench near the entrance, his head in his hands. She almost walked past him, almost went back to her deadlifts like nothing had happened, but something in his posture stopped her. "Hey," she said, sitting down next to him, but leaving space between them. "You good?" He looked up, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely rattled. "Yeah, just... that could have been a lot worse. If he'd been alone, if no one had seen it happen, if the plate had hit an artery. But it didn't. You were there. You handled it." This time, he ran a hand over his face, and she noticed his fingers were shaking slightly. "I've been coaching for 6 years. I've seen people hurt themselves in stupid ways, freak accidents, careless mistakes. Every time I think about all the things that could have prevented it. Better supervision, clearer instructions, stricter equipment protocols, and every time I know that no matter how careful I am, something like this can still happen. Olivia sat with that for a moment. She'd never considered what it might feel like to carry that kind of responsibility, to walk into a room full of people lifting heavy objects and know that their safety was, in some measure, your job. "Is that why you're so particular about form?" she asked. "Why you watch everyone so closely?" "Partly. Also because bad form under load is how people destroy their joints and end up needing surgery by 40. He leaned back against the wall, his breathing starting to settle. "I know I can come across as intense, controlling even. I've heard the feedback, but I've also seen what happens when people treat this stuff like it's casual. Bodies break. And they don't always heal right." She thought about the squat rack incident, the way she'd accused him of being inconsiderate, of not paying attention, and she realized with uncomfortable clarity that she'd been wrong. Not about the bar being moved, that had happened, but about the reason. He hadn't moved it out of arrogance or carelessness. He'd moved it because his brain was constantly scanning for risks, for problems, for things that didn't fit the pattern of a safely run training floor. An unattended barbell to him wasn't someone's work in progress. It was a potential hazard. "I owe you an apology," she said. He turned to look at her, surprised. "For what?" "For assuming the worst about you. For thinking you were just some guy who didn't respect other people's space. I didn't understand what you were actually doing." She gestured vaguely at the gym floor. "You're not rearranging things to suit yourself. You're managing chaos so it doesn't turn into blood on the floor." "It's both," he said quietly. "I do get focused on my own training sometimes. I do make mistakes. That day with your bar, I should have looked around more carefully before I moved anything. You weren't wrong to call me out. You were just wrong about why it happened." They sat in silence for a few minutes, the gym gradually filling up with the Saturday morning crowd. Somewhere across the room, someone dropped a dumbbell. The sound echoed off the walls, sharp and startling, and Olivia watched Jordan flinch slightly before he forced himself to relax. "You want to get out of here?" she asked. "Grab coffee or something? I don't think either of us is going to have a productive training session right now." He looked at her like he was trying to figure out if she was serious. "You sure? I thought you didn't like me." "I thought I didn't like you too," she admitted. "Turns out I just didn't understand you." "Which is different." They ended up at a cafe 3 blocks from the gym, sitting outside at a wobbly metal table with mediocre coffee and surprisingly good pastries. Jordan ordered black coffee and a croissant. Olivia got a latte and a blueberry muffin. Neither of them talked about the incident at first. Instead, they talked about training, about the challenge coming up in 3 weeks, about programming strategies and recovery protocols, and the difference between pushing through discomfort and ignoring warning signs your body was breaking down. "I used to ignore everything," Jordan said, breaking off a piece of croissant and not eating it. "Tweaked back, tape it and keep going. Shoulder pain? Just modify the angle. I thought toughness meant training through everything. Took a herniated disc at 24 to teach me that toughness actually means knowing when to stop." "How bad was it?" "Bad enough that I couldn't stand up straight for 3 months. Bad enough that I had to relearn how to deadlift from scratch with a physical therapist who made me start with a PVC pipe. Bad enough that I seriously considered quitting training altogether because I was terrified of making it worse." He finally ate the piece of croissant, chewing slowly. "That's when I decided to become a coach. Figured if I couldn't lift the way I used to, at least I could help other people avoid my mistakes." Olivia wrapped her hands around her latte, letting the warmth seep into her palms. "I get that. Not the injury part, but the feeling like you have to prove something. I've spent most of my life being overlooked. Too small, too quiet, too whatever. Training was the first thing I found, where the weight doesn't care what you look like or how loud you are. It either moves or it doesn't. Results are objective." "Until they're not," Jordan said. "Until you realize that half of training is subjective. How you feel, what you're ready for, whether you're pushing yourself toward growth or toward injury. That's the hard part to learn, that's what I'm trying to teach. She looked at him across the table, really looked at him, and saw something she hadn't allowed herself to see before. Not arrogance, not control. Just someone trying to do a difficult job with integrity, carrying the weight of responsibility for other people's safety, and occasionally making mistakes because he was human. It didn't erase the squat rack incident, but it reframed it, gave it context, made it smaller. "I'm sorry I made assumptions," she said again. "I should have given you the benefit of the doubt. And I should have been more aware of my surroundings. We're both right. We're both sorry. Can we move forward from here?" "Yeah," she said. "I think we can." The next 3 weeks of training took on a different quality. Jordan was still exacting, still precise, still watching her form with the intensity of someone scanning for fractures in a load-bearing wall. But now Olivia understood what she was seeing. She understood that when he corrected her squat depth, he wasn't criticizing her effort. He was protecting her knees. When he made her rest longer between sets, he wasn't doubting her toughness. He was optimizing her recovery so she could perform better on the next round. The clarity changed everything. The sessions became collaborative instead of combative, a shared project with a defined goal instead of a power struggle disguised as coaching. She also started noticing other things. The way Jordan always checked the equipment before sessions, running his hands along barbell sleeves to feel for burrs that could tear skin, testing clips to make sure they held weight securely. The way he positioned himself during heavy lifts, close enough to spot if something went wrong but far enough back that he wasn't crowding her space. The way he remembered details. Her right shoulder had been sore last week, so he programmed extra mobility work this week. She'd mentioned struggling with her conditioning, so he added short interval sprints to build her aerobic capacity without destroying her recovery. It was care disguised as coaching, or maybe it was coaching that required care to be effective. Either way, she felt it, and it did something to the knot of defensiveness she'd been carrying in her chest since the first week. The challenge arrived faster than expected. A Saturday morning in early autumn with clear skies, and a crowd that filled the gym's parking lot and spilled onto the sidewalk. 23 participants, 11 teams, plus one alternate, all gathered in the turf area that had been transformed into a competition floor. The energy was electric, nervous laughter mixing with pre-event adrenaline and the constant background noise of people testing grips and checking equipment. Olivia stood near the warm-up area, rolling her shoulders, trying to find the calm focus she needed to perform under pressure. Jordan appeared next to her with a clipboard and a stopwatch. "Nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," she admitted. "I don't do well with performance pressure. I get in my head, start second-guessing every movement. Good thing you're not doing this alone then." He handed her a water bottle. "Stay hydrated. We've got 40 minutes before the strength medley. Use the time to warm up properly, not to overthink. You've done every movement in this medley 100 times in training. Today's just another rep." Except it wasn't. Today was a test of everything they'd built over 6 weeks, in front of a crowd, with judges watching and scores being recorded. But she nodded anyway, took the water, and started her warm-up routine while Jordan moved through the crowd, checking in with other athletes, making sure everyone had what they needed. The strength medley was brutal. 5 stations, a heavy farmer's carry, a sandbag over shoulder, a max-effort yoke walk, a log press for reps, and a sled push. Each station had a time cap. Each missed rep or failed movement added penalty seconds to the final score. Olivia's hands were shaking when she gripped the farmer's carry handles, 80 pounds per hand, and started her walk across the marked distance. The weight felt heavier than it had in training, her grip already starting to slip after 20 feet. But she clenched harder and kept moving. Finished, dropped the handles, sprinted to the sandbag. Jordan was at every station, calling out cues without being intrusive, his voice steady and clear over the noise of the crowd. "Drive your hips, keep your chest up, breathe." She heard him more than she saw him, his words cutting through the chaos in her head and giving her something concrete to focus on. By the time she reached the sled push, her lungs were burning and her legs felt like they'd been replaced with cement. But she put her hands on the uprights and pushed. One step, then another, then another. The sled moved slowly, inches at a time, but it moved. When she crossed the finish line, she doubled over, gasping. and Jordan was there with a towel and water. "Solid work. Time looks good. We're in the top half right now." The conditioning gauntlet came 2 hours later, after a break for food and recovery. It was worse than the strength medley. 3 rounds of a 400-meter run, 20 wall balls, 15 burpee box jumps, and 10-calorie row. Designed to test speed and pain tolerance in equal measure. Olivia's pacing fell apart by the second round. She was moving too fast in the run, burning through her aerobic capacity before the wall balls, and by the time she hit the burpees, her legs were jelly. Jordan appeared next to the box. "Scale it down. Step-ups instead of jumps. We need you to finish, not to be perfect." She wanted to argue, wanted to push through on pure stubbornness like she always did. But she remembered what he'd said about the difference between toughness and stupidity, about knowing when to stop before your body made the decision for you. She scaled the movement, finished the round, collapsed on the rower for the final calories. Jordan didn't say anything, just handed her water and let her breathe. The skill challenge was last. A team-based event that required coordination under fatigue, synchronized kettlebell swings, partner-assisted handstand holds, and a trust fall sequence where one person fell backward and the other had to catch them from a marked distance. Olivia had been dreading this one all week. She was fine with individual suffering. Shared suffering felt vulnerable in a way she wasn't comfortable with. They stood facing each other for the synchronized swings, matching their breathing, counting down from 3. The kettlebells moved in unison, perfectly timed, and for 30 seconds Olivia felt like they were one unit instead of 2 people pretending to work together. Then came the handstand holds. Jordan went first, kicking up into a handstand while Olivia steadied his legs, her hands gripping his calves to keep him stable. He held it for the required 10 seconds, came down smoothly and traded places with her. She kicked up, felt his hands catch her legs, trusted that he wouldn't let her fall, held the position until the judge called time. The trust fall was last. They stood at the marked distance, 10 feet between them, and Olivia was supposed to fall backward while Jordan caught her before she hit the ground. Her heart was hammering, not from exertion, from fear. She'd never been good at this kind of trust, the letting go and hoping someone shows up kind. Every instinct in her body was screaming to stay upright, to stay in control, to not put her safety in someone else's hands. "I've got you," Jordan said from behind her. "I promise." She closed her eyes, let herself tip backward, felt the moment of freefall where nothing was supporting her weight and gravity took over. Then felt his hands catch her, solid and sure, cradling her shoulders and back before lowering her gently to the ground. When she opened her eyes, he was looking down at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "See," he said quietly. "You can trust me." "I know," she said, and realized she meant it. They placed 4th overall. Not bad for a team that had started with mutual hostility and a barbell dispute. The awards ceremony happened in the gym's main area. Medals handed out to the top 3 teams, certificates for everyone else. Olivia stood next to Jordan, still sweaty, still exhausted, and felt something shift in her chest. Pride, maybe, or satisfaction, or the strange relief that came from finishing something hard and realizing you'd been wrong about how it would feel. After the ceremony, after the crowd dispersed and the equipment was packed away, Jordan found her near the exit. "You did good today, better than I expected, honestly." "Thanks, I think." She smiled despite herself. "You're not so bad as a coach, even if you did move my bar that one time." "I'll never live that down, will I?" "Probably not, but I'll stop holding it against you." He laughed, a real laugh that softened his face and made him look younger. "Fair enough. Listen, I wanted to ask you something, and feel free to say no if this crosses a line." Her pulse spiked. "Okay. There's a lifting competition next month. Nothing huge, just a local meet for intermediate lifters. I think you'd do well. And if you're interested, I'd like to coach you through the prep. No charity challenge, no team event. Just you, the barbell, and a 12-week training cycle to see what you're capable of." Olivia looked at him, at the honesty in his expression, and felt the last piece of her initial judgment crack apart. He wasn't trying to control her or prove anything. He was offering to invest his time in her progress because he thought she had potential, because he saw something worth developing, That felt like the opposite of being overlooked. "Yes," she said. "I'm in." "Good. We start Monday, 7 a.m. Same place." "Same place," she agreed. They parted ways in the parking lot, and Olivia drove home with the windows down, letting the autumn air cool the sweat on her skin. She thought about the last 6 weeks, about how wrong she'd been, how easily she'd jumped to assumptions, how much she'd almost missed because she'd been too busy defending herself to actually see what was in front of her. She thought about Jordan's hands catching her during the trust fall, about the way he'd been there at every station of the medley, about the care embedded in every correction he'd ever given her, and she thought about the fact that she was going to see him on Monday and Wednesday, and every session after that for the next 12 weeks. And instead of dreading it, she was looking forward to it. Not just to the training, to him. To the way he made her feel seen without making her feel small. To the way he challenged her without crushing her. To the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she'd found something unexpected in the last place she thought to look. 12 weeks turned into 16. The competition came and went. She hit a personal record in every lift, placed respectably in her weight class, and walked away with a medal she kept on her desk at home as proof that hard things were survivable. The training continued. Jordan kept programming, kept coaching, kept showing up with the same steady presence that had irritated her at first and now felt necessary. They fell into a rhythm. Early morning sessions, coffee after particularly brutal workouts, occasional meals that started as recovery fuel and turned into conversations about everything and nothing. Olivia didn't call it dating, didn't want to risk naming it and breaking whatever fragile thing was building between them. But she noticed the way his eyes tracked her across the gym even when he was working with other clients, noticed the way he always saved a spot for her at his usual cafe table, noticed the way his corrections had started to come with his hand on her back, warm and grounding, a touch that lingered half a second longer than strictly necessary. One night, 6 months after the challenge, they stayed late at the gym to film technique videos for Jordan's coaching platform. The place was empty, lights dimmed, just the two of them and a tripod set up in the squat rack area. Olivia ran through a set of squats while Jordan filmed, then they switched positions, and she held the camera while he demonstrated a clean. When he finished, he walked over to check the footage, standing close enough that she could smell the faint scent of his soap mixed with chalk dust. "Looks good," he said, not looking at the screen, looking at her. "Yeah?" "Yeah." He took the camera from her hands, set it on the bench, and turned back to her with an expression that was careful and uncertain in a way she'd never seen on him before. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "That first day, when you yelled at me about the barbell, did you actually hate me or were you just mad about the bar?" She thought about it, about the anger that had felt so righteous in the moment, about the assumptions she'd made, about how far they'd come since then. "Both. And neither. I didn't know you. I just knew that I was tired of being overlooked and you felt like proof that nothing was going to change, that I'd always have to fight for space. And now? Now I know that you weren't overlooking me. You were just looking at something different than I was, seeing problems I didn't see, trying to keep everyone safe, including me." She reached out, straightened the collar of his shirt without thinking about it. "Now I know that you pay more attention than anyone I've ever met, that you notice everything, that you care about people in a way that's kind of terrifying and kind of amazing." He caught her hand before she could pull it back, his fingers wrapping around hers with gentle pressure. "I notice you," he said quietly, in case that wasn't obvious. "It's getting more obvious," she admitted, "every day." "Good." He stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "Because I'm done pretending this is just coaching. I'm done pretending I don't think about you when you're not here. I'm done pretending I don't want this to be something more than professional." Her breath caught. "Jordan, you can say no. If this crosses a line, if I'm reading this wrong, if you don't feel the same way, tell me, and we'll reset. We'll go back to coach and athlete and I'll never bring it up again. But I need to know. I need to know if I'm the only one feeling this." She looked at him, at the vulnerability in his face, at the way he was offering her the power to hurt him and trusting that she wouldn't. And she thought about trust falls and synchronized swings and 6 months of steady presence and incremental progress. She thought about the way he'd changed her life without ever asking her to change who she was. "You're not the only one," she said. He kissed her then, soft and careful, his hand coming up to cradle the back of her head like she was something precious. She kissed him back, rising up on her toes to close the distance, her hands finding his shoulders and holding on. It felt right in a way that nothing else had felt right in months, like coming home after a long trip, like finding the answer to a question she hadn't known how to ask. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers, breathing hard. "For the record," he said, "I'm still sorry about the barbell thing." She laughed, the sound bright and unguarded. "For the record, I'm glad you moved it. Because if you hadn't, I would have just kept training alone, being angry at the world, and I never would have known what I was missing." "What are you missing?" "This. You. The feeling that someone actually sees me and likes what they see." She pulled back enough to look at him properly. "I'm not impressed," I said, "remember?" "I remember. I was wrong. I'm very impressed. I'm so impressed I can't stop watching you, which is creepy if we're being honest, but also true." He smiled, the kind of smile that transformed his whole face. "Watch all you want. I've been watching you too. That's half of what coaching is. And the other half? Hoping the person you're watching decides to trust you, decides to take the risk, decides that maybe you're worth the effort." He kissed her again, briefer this time but no less certain. "You're worth the effort, Olivia. You've always been worth it." They left the gym together that night, the footage unfinished, the lights turned off, the equipment waiting for Monday morning. Olivia drove home with her phone buzzing with a text from Jordan, just a simple "thank you for taking the risk" that made her smile in the darkness of her car. She thought about chalk dust and trust falls, and the long, strange journey from anger to understanding, to something that felt suspiciously like love. She thought about how easy it would have been to quit after the first week, to walk away, to let one bad interaction define everything that came after. And she was grateful. Grateful she'd stayed. Grateful she'd been wrong. Grateful for the unexpected gift of finding someone who saw her not as a problem to be managed, but as a person worth investing in. Someone who'd moved her barbell and then, slowly, carefully, moved everything else too. 6 months later, they were still training together, still meeting for early morning sessions, still pushing each other through brutal workouts, still grabbing coffee after and talking about everything from Olympic lifting mechanics to what they wanted their lives to look like 5 years from now. But now there were other things too. Dinners at each other's apartments, weekend hikes that ended with them sitting on a hilltop watching the sunset, quiet evenings where they didn't talk at all, just existed in the same space, comfortable in the silence that came with deep familiarity. The gym regulars noticed, started making comments about the power couple and asking when they were going to compete together officially. Jordan deflected with his usual calm, but Olivia caught the small smile he tried to hide whenever someone mentioned it, like he was pleased, like the idea of being publicly linked to her was something he wanted rather than something he tolerated. One morning, as they were setting up for a heavy squat session, Jordan handed her a small wrapped box. She looked at it, confused. "It's not my birthday." "I know. It's the anniversary of the charity challenge. 6 months since you decided to trust me enough to fall backward." He gestured to the box. "Open it." Inside was a keychain. Simple metal, shaped like a barbell with small plates on each end. Engraved on the bar were the words, "Worth the wait." She looked up at him, her throat suddenly tight. "Jordan, I know it's cheesy. I know it's a terrible pun. But I wanted you to have something that reminded you of where we started, of the fact that you took a chance on someone you thought you hated, and it turned into something neither of us expected." He took the keychain from her hand, slipped it onto her gym bag's zipper. "Every time you come here, every time you pick up this bag, I want you to remember that you're worth the effort, worth the wait, worth everything." She kissed him right there in the middle of the gym, not caring who saw, not caring that they were supposed to be warming up, not caring about anything except the feeling of his arms around her and the certainty that she'd found something rare, something real, something that had started with anger and chalk dust and a barbell in the wrong place, and had somehow transformed into the most solid thing in her life. "I love you," she said when they broke apart. The first time she'd said it out loud. The first time she'd let herself be that vulnerable. "I love you too," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I've loved you since the day you yelled at me about respecting people's space. You had chalk on your face and fury in your eyes, and I thought, that's someone who refuses to be invisible. I wanted to know you. I wanted to earn your respect. I wanted to prove I could be the person you needed me to be." "You did," she said. "You are." They trained that morning like they always did, moving through the program with focus and intensity. But there was a lightness to it now. A joy. The knowledge that they were building something together, not just in strength but in trust, in partnership, in the slow accumulation of shared experiences that turned two separate people into a unit. After the session, they sat on the turf area, sweaty and exhausted, drinking water and watching the morning crowd filter in. Jordan leaned back on his hands, his legs stretched out in front of him, and looked at her with an expression that was equal parts contentment and wonder. "What are you thinking?" Olivia asked. "That I'm glad you didn't let me get away with moving your bar without consequences, that I'm glad you called me out, that I'm glad you stayed angry long enough to give me a chance to explain." He reached over, took her hand. "That I'm glad you're here. I'm glad I'm here too," she said, "even though you're still kind of controlling about equipment setup. It's a safety thing. I know. I'm just giving you a hard time." She squeezed his fingers. "But seriously, thank you. For seeing me. For believing I was worth coaching. For not giving up when I was difficult." "You were never difficult. You were careful. There's a difference." He pulled her closer, kissed the top of her head. "And you're welcome. For everything." They sat like that for a while, watching people lift and train and chase their own versions of progress. The gym hummed around them, familiar and alive. The space that had witnessed their entire journey from hostility to partnership to love. It felt right. It felt earned. It felt like the beginning of something that would last far beyond barbell disputes and training cycles. And Olivia knew, with the kind of certainty that came from experience rather than hope, that she'd finally found the place where she belonged, not just in the gym, not just in the training, but here. With him. In the space they'd built together, one set, one rep, one moment of trust at a time. The barbell keychain stayed on her gym bag, a reminder, a promise, a symbol of the truth that sometimes the best things in life started with conflict and ended with love. That sometimes the people who challenged you were the ones worth keeping. That sometimes, if you were brave enough to stay angry long enough to understand why, you might find something you didn't know you needed. She wasn't impressed, she'd said. But now, watching Jordan move through the gym with quiet confidence, watching the way he helped everyone without needing recognition, watching the way he looked at her like she was the most important person in the room, now she was more than impressed. She was grateful, she was certain, she was home.